What up, everyone? Matt Barton here with this week's Broker Minute or Two. Wanted to have a little fun at the front end and wanted to see if you could see some similarity here. There's my good friend Rhett with a cool hat, the dope hat that he gave me. Figured I would do a plug for Rhett on my little minute here. He sure does put out a lot of good information on the lending front, so make sure you're paying attention to his messages. And Rhett, thanks for the hat. Okay, on to this week's Broker Minute or Two. So I want to ask a larger question. The division has a lot of rules, and one of those rules is that, or they give us the ability to act as a limited attorney, and that limitation comes in. We're allowed to fill in blanks on contracts that are written by attorneys. And so one of those forms is a blank addendum, which presents an interesting problem. So we see all kinds of things on blank addendums, but some of the common ones are change in dates and deadlines. But another one is seller agreeing to pay closing costs on behalf of the buyer. And since that is such an easy function, we see that show up a lot in the blank addendum. And that's not a bad thing. But I just was wondering if you were aware, let me share my screen here, that there is actually a document. There's actually a document in place from UAR called the Closing Costs Addendum. Did you know this even existed? And so my experience as a principal broker is something so simple can actually present a problem. And I'm trying to make the greater case for try and use the forms that have already been through the tests and the trials to help you and your clients avoid problems. And this is a simple example, the closing costs addendum. So if we look at paragraph 1, right, in most situations when we've either written or we've received an addendum that says seller to contribute $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs, at closing. That's pretty standard verbiage or some version of that. Well, in this form, they address, not by accident, but because as principal brokers, we see these issues, right? And there's quite often a dispute as to what actually closing costs are. The seller has one version and it's a smaller set of what closing costs are, and the buyer has a much different version and it's a bigger complete set. And so what this document does at a minimum is brings some clarity contractually to what is accepted or not accepted closing costs. So let's go through these real quickly. Item A, permanent reduction or temporary reduction in the mortgage loan interest rate. So currently we have all kinds of incentives for buyers. There's 2-1 buy downs, 3-1 buy downs. You can buy down the rate permanently for the life of the loan. Those are all covered in Section A. So there's no dispute whether funds can be used towards that end. Item B, mortgage financing costs. Think your appraisal, right? Who's paying for that? Those can be covered. Item C, closing costs. When we go to a title company, they have closing fees. They have sometimes riders that need to go on with a particular property. There may be some additional fees based on the uniqueness of the property. Those are covered in item number C. Item D, prepaids and escrows. This is a pretty big one, right? So where I've seen a lot of disputes with people, it's like, wait a minute, the buyer is trying to prepay their HOA, they're trying to prepay taxes, they're trying to prepay homeowners insurance. If those are related to a lender's lending program, those are in. And here's the great part. The last sentence of this is what I think ends so many of the potential disputes, and that is any unused portion, meaning A, B, C, or D, any unused portion of the seller's contribution at buyer's option may be used to reduce the purchase price. So if you weren't able to use it in those categories, at a minimum, I can use it, and everybody's already agreed to it in advance that we can use it to reduce the purchase price. Man, that makes for a smoother transaction and does away with the disputes that potentially could arise. You look way more professional. If you can talk to this in your presenting of the contract, you can kind of paint some of your competition in the corner a little bit, right? Into a corner and say, a lot of agents are lazy and won't use stuff that benefits their clients. It takes a little more work to add these additional things in here, but there's so much more protection for you as my client. And so I'm always going to err on the side of protecting you. So good information. I hope that renews your interest in using the approved forms. It will save you grief in your life and therefore hopefully grief in my life. Thanks for all you do. I hope you have a great week, and we'll talk soon.